I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 9 to the Sky. Now, last episode I mentioned how we were in dire need of power, and that our phytogenic insulator mystical agriculture setup, that's a mouthful, was actually going to help us produce power, even though it does require a ton of it. And the way that it's going to do that is through the use of uranium, because today we are going to be diving into the Bigger Reactors mod. Now, there are many ways to generate power in this pack, and some are technically better than what we're going to be working on, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Bigger Reactors, and I really do love that mod. At the moment, we're currently generating power through the magmator, and I've been told that the magmators may not be the best option here either, and I should have just went with one of the other ways of generating power through power. And that specific way was to use a thermo generator. And instead of using lava for the thermo generator, we could have taken it up to blazing, and we could have used a blaze block underneath the thermo generator. And that would have increased the temperature quite a bit. And according to the quest, even says it will produce gains of 180% more power, which is insane, and I 100% agree. But that would make power trivial and would leave me with no desire to improve on my setups. And so that's why I've chosen to kind of not go that route. And instead, we are going to be playing around with the Bigger Reactors mod, and we are going to be upping our power gains for sure with that. As you are going to see the insane gains from just a small amount of resources that really go into this thing. Now, don't get this mod, the Bigger Reactors, confused with extreme reactors. They work entirely different, but they do have some of the same characteristics. I will say this is, in my opinion, the easier mod to sort of get into to generate power, as it's pretty cut and dry. You build the system, you place in the moderators, you add the fuel, boom, produces fuel and produces a byproduct. You don't have to worry about explosions, and those byproducts are easily convertible into other materials, which will then be able to be used as higher tier moderators, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then with this mod, if you really want to, you can convert the raw power that you're producing in heat into steam, and then use a turbine to produce power. But that's some more advanced topics that we'll get into possibly later. Now, at the moment for me, there's only a few things I need to figure out. One of those things is, where am I going to place this? And then the next one is, how big am I going to build it? Now, after a little bit of thought, I've kind of come up, I think, with a good place for this to be, and that is going to be directly in this corner space here. And now, something I will recommend, at least build your base out a 7x7. Now, you can build this out smaller, and you can do, for example, a 3x3 interior if you really want. You could even make this thing as small as a 3x3 in size. But I do suggest that you make at least a 7x7, as I'm going to explain why here in a second. Now, the height of your reactor does need to be at least, I think, 3 blocks tall or something like that, because you need room for your rods. But as far as height goes, that's really just going to determine how much fuel and energy you're going to be producing from your reactor. Now, in my case, I have gone 8 blocks up to essentially contain it within the shape of our base. And so right now I'm just building out the frame of the reactor. Something to note about reactors that's kind of cool. Apparently, according to this pack, and I think this is configurable, the max size you can build this reactor is 128 by 128 by 192 blocks. That is very large. That's bigger than this base, I'm pretty sure. So just imagine the sheer scale of that thing. Now, I'm building one reactor out right now, but the goal is to have all of these 4 corners set up and having a bigger reactor running on it. Now, in order for this multi-block to be completed, we're really just going to need a reactor port. This is going to allow us to insert items into it. And then we're also going to need our reactor terminal. This is going to allow us to turn the reactor on and off. Still haven't fully figured out exactly where this is going to be placed, but for right now, I'm just going to place it in the wall. And then we're going to need some sort of reactor control rods. In this case, I'm going to be building mine out in a kind of checkerboard pattern. So I'm going to have my rods placed up top here. Actually, it's not going to be like you see now. Essentially, I'm going to have a rod in the center like this, and then I'm going to have rods being checkerboarded on the side. So just like so. And this is going to help maximize our efficiency. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. So I think this is one of the better designs for this. Now, attached to those reactor control rods, we're going to want to place down our reactor fuel rod. And this is what is essentially going to hold our liquefied uranium. And now for the moderators. And this is where things can be kind of confusing with this. Now, we should be able to see what this is used for. And underneath the reactor moderator blocks, we can click this top section here. And this will start to tell us a bit about all of these individual moderators. Now, from what I have seen, without going into all the modium type materials, diamond is one of the best. And it's really kind of a battle between diamond and platinum, both of them being rather good. But I think diamond is going to be producing more power, but it is going to use a bit more fuel than the platinum is. Now, in this case, using more fuel is not going to be a big deal. So I'm just going to stick with diamond, which is something that we actually have more abundance of than we do platinum. And these just need to be placed in between the rods, like you see here. And if you really have enough and you want to go wild, you probably want to place these also on the outside of your fuel rods. But if you want to go cheap like me, this should work just fine as well. And the reason I say that is because the moderators are essentially allowing for the transfer of radiation and heat into each other. And that's what generates power here, is inside of these fuel rods, we're going to be sending radiation and heat back and forth through these rods up to 4 blocks away. But something to note, if the rod is touching a casing, that's when the radiation and the heat and so on just gets nullified. So this is why you want to do at least a 7x7, I say, because you don't want this up against the casing, because that means this side right here will not be able to bounce off and be able to reach another reactor rod, essentially voiding any of the effects that would have been off of that side of the rod. And I mean, you'll end up with a little bit of efficiency loss, but if you're limited on resources, this is still going to generate power. It's not like it's going to stop it from generating power if you have that sort of thing set up. But if you have available, make sure you leave an air gap around the side or fill it with moderator blocks. Now, I honestly think it'll be a cool test if I can do this. I'll have to see. But I'm going to try and load this up like it is, and then we will see how much it generates. And then I would like to also fill the interior with moderator blocks just to see if there is a significant gain. Now, you may encounter this problem much like I'm encountering it. This should have completed the multi-block. But when I click this, notice it says invisible light on the interior. And that is because, yet again, we have another culprit, and that is these feral flare lanterns. And yes, they are at it again, of course, causing more problems by lighting up the interior space. So we have to get them to go away before this will fully complete. There is a way to do that, but just removing them is one of the best ways. So as you can see, the multi-block has now been complete, and we have ourselves a 7x7 reactor. So how exactly does this work? So at the moment, we have nothing really going on because we are not feeding it any fuel. And so we can set this into an insert, which I believe this access port is right now. You can see it says input. And so we can just pipe the uranium into it. Now, to get the waste out, we need to change this into an output. And it says outputting waste or outputting fuel. We want to make sure we set it to output waste. And so we should be able to pipe the waste out. Now, I want to hook this up to AE because we're going to have some automation go on. But for now, I just want to show that you can use a hopper to start to fill this up. And we can see the uranium being generated in here because it's going to turn it into a liquid fuel. And now with this fully filled, we should be able to just turn it on. So by turning it on, we're going to start to see with the current moderators how much power this is going to generate. And you can already see this is generating a lot of power, utilizing about 3 or 4 millibuckets, but it's producing 94,000 RF per tick with our current moderator setup, which is huge numbers, by the way. So with us knowing that it's about 95,000, let's go ahead and now fill this with moderators on the outer edges of the reactor and see if this really increases the power output by much. Now with those moderators in, we see a gain of about 5,000 RF per tick. So something to keep in mind that by adding those diamonds in, and I probably could fill the whole thing with it, it's not a substantial gain that you're getting. Definitely when you're pushing numbers like 95,000 RF per tick. Now, you know what? This is called bigger reactors. So I was thinking, why don't I just extend it a little bit further? I think this is going to, one, make it look a little bit nicer in the base. It's also going to produce more power and it's going to use more fuel, but it is going to look much cooler. And I might still leave the input here so that way we can still have our cables running down, which I think is going to look really nice. Now this is going to cost a lot more material. Just the base structure alone ended up costing well over 300 casings. So check out this behemoth. Oh man, this is going to be generating quite a bit of power. Only way to find out is by turning it on how much we're going to be generating. Oh boy, and I'm going to be setting up 4 of these. 160,000 RF per tick, so power per tick. And we're going to need every last bit of it. Just judging by how much power our Applied Energistics at this moment costs us, that is going to be a huge number. So I'm pretty excited about this because now we're going to have to worry less about our power. So by the time that I have all of these reactors up, we should be producing about 640,000 RF per tick. And so now for the fun part, let's go ahead and get this semi-automated. So now how exactly would I go about automating this particular bigger reactor and making sure that we're not using more fuel than we absolutely need to? Because we don't want this to continue sending in fuel and being on and actively running when we're not utilizing the power. So one of the options is we could use a computer from Computercraft. That's just one of many ways, but honestly, one of the easiest solutions to this problem is just by simply using the redstone port. Well, technically 2 redstone ports, because one redstone port is going to communicate with the other. So with that, let's set up the logistics for this. So we want to send a redstone signal over here. So let's go ahead and set this to be our redstone control that is going to control our reactor. So there's a lot of inputs in here and a lot of cool things you can customize, but this makes it super easy to automate. All we have to do is set this to be on a toggle trigger. So when this receives a signal and has a signal, it's going to mean it's on, and whenever it doesn't have a signal, the reactor's off. So that's pretty straightforward. And we want to hit apply changes down here to save that. Now on this side, this is where we get to determine how our reactor is whether on or off. And I'm going to choose that whenever the reactor basically is full on power. So to be able to do this, we want to set our toggle trigger here underneath the output stored power. We want to make sure this is set to while below. So if it drops below a certain amount, we want to make sure it sends a redstone signal. So in this case, I'm going to set that target at 80%. If it drops below 80% power, then I want it to be toggled on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and the changes should be applied. Now, right now, we have 100% power. So to get power out of this thing, we need a power tap. And I've also made an energy trash can. So I can dump all of my power, but notice when I did that, now it is below the 80%. And because of it being below 80%, this is sending a redstone signal. So now we just essentially need to get the redstone signal over here. And there's a couple of mods that we can use to do this. Create has a ton of really, really nice options. And we should be able to actually make one of those create options. But to make this as simple as possible, I'm just going to use vanilla redstone. So right here, we're just going to place down 3 blocks, and I'm going to run the redstone signal over here. And this is going to power this block. And so once this reactor maxes out at 80%, we're going to notice this reactor is going to shut itself off, which is exactly what we want, right when it goes above 80%, which will give it a little bit of cooldown time because it'll still generate power even after it has been shut off. And so we should be able to see that. It's getting very close. I'd say right about here is probably 80%. And so currently our status is on, and momentarily, there it goes. It just shut off. And notice it's still going to climb up a little bit as the reactor is still just in its cooldown. And that gives it just enough time for this to work. Now, it will not kick back on though until this power in this buffer drops below 80%. So that should hopefully help the flickering that can happen in situations, but I don't think we're going to be using that much power. So with all of this set up, oh, this is going to look so good. I'm going to wrap around here with some decorations, but I do want to get the other reactors up and running, and then we can start worrying about how we're going to hook our applied energistics system into this. Now things are coming together here with the build, and I'm slowly but surely getting all of them in place. But there is a problem. This is currently in the way, but there is a solution to this that is really, really cool. We can use Dyer's new cut gadget. And this is a great example of how to use this thing. So what I want to do is with the cut gadget, I want to be in the cut mode, and I want to right click on this. It's going to be kind of hard to do, but I think I can right click there, or I shift right clicked on that one, and then right click. It's going to be very difficult. There we go. Just shift right click on both sides, I guess. Now, this right here is in red. Hopefully that does mean it is cuttable. I really hope it's cuttable. And what I want to do is essentially cut it. And then I should be able to take and then place this down somewhere else. But you got to be careful with this tool. Whenever you do go to paste the thing back in, you want to make sure that it's not somewhere that is going to void blocks, because whatever it takes the place of, it will void. So I guess what we can do, just like we've done all of our other stuff, we can anchor the position here, and then we can start to configure exactly where we want this. So I'm going to take it out a few, and this is also going to go down, and let's go ahead and confirm that. And this is now exactly where I wanted it. I basically just wanted to move it from that position one block out, and now I just need to open up the thing and hit paste, and then right click. And that should move everything over, including all of the patterns that were inside. So if I want to move this later on as well, I can just definitely move it anywhere. The cut paste tool is fantastic. Now that we have some actual darkness, you can really start to see Applied Energistics shine. Oh my goodness, that looks so good, as these kind of have these emissive textures. But speaking of Applied Energistics, I am routing things over here, and because I need to set up the insertion into the reactors. And then we also need to be able to pull out the byproduct, which is going to be out of the blue ports. And we just basically set that to the output waste. Now, I do have uranium that is being produced from our sifting setup, but I also have another setup. So I'm going to go ahead and have this out here that is producing the essence. And so this should hopefully be able to keep up. I do have one of them running. It is currently maxed out, but I am going to be updating the drawers and upgrading those over time. But for right now, I've got to build out a recipe, and these are all going to be set to force the craft. So this produces 2, and we just need to add that to our crafters. And speaking of crafters, notice this is getting a little bit full. I now only have a few slots left. It should be 8 of them with the 8 molecular assemblers. So I have these areas designated right here, and all around that are going to basically have a line that runs down into them that are going to be full of these individual pattern provider setups or molecular assembler setups. So I cannot wait to get those set up. That's going to provide a ton of space, especially when I upgrade them, and they are going to be a part of the extended AE. So let's get the export buses on here. So on the green, this is going to get an export bus. We're going to be exporting out of our network, and we need to make sure we define uranium that's going into this. And then we also want to apply those crafting cards in here to make sure that it is going to force that autocraft if it runs out of the components that are in the system. And then of course, inserting back into our system, we just want to make sure that we have that in here. And then that is going to send that waste back into our storages. Now, to be able to support this max power, what I do want to do is on the bottom of this reactor, I do want to include my port down here. So let's see, that's 1, 2, 3. That should be the middle. And I'm gonna put the power tap on the bottom, and I'm gonna use a plug. This will help us kind of support this power. I'm gonna select the main channel, and our transfer limit, we don't even have to mess with that, because even if this is set, which it is right here, we're not producing 800,000 off of this node. So this whole thing, we don't have power going anywhere, but we can now pull power off of these reactors. Some cool things to note: if you do have just a POWA setup and you don't want to use Flux networks for this, well, then POWA can support this amount of input and output. Believe it or not, up to 2 million, I do believe, is its max IO. So POWA, if we take a look here, we can actually see that on the max tier Nitro, it has a 2 million RF or FE per tick transfer limit. Now, I think it's just better to be future-proof, and so going with Flux Networks, it can support way more than 2 million. And so what I think I will do for right now is I'm just going to remove one of the nodes that I had underneath here that was a plug, And I'm going to replace it with a point now. That way I can take the power from those reactors and I can then use the point to send power into our ender cell. And so the funny thing to note is now any wireless charging that we have on us is coming specifically from these reactors. And now I can get rid of these very pesky and ugly wind turbines. We just don't need them anymore. So I've gone ahead and crafted up the extended molecular assemblers and the extended pattern providers. And this alone is going to be 4 times the size of what we currently have here with just one of these set up. So it is kind of a lot. My plan is to have a bunch of these. So yeah, we're probably going to have more storage than we'll ever need with just having 8, I guess it would be, of these set up. So first of all, I need to make sure that this cable is going to be able to connect to this. So I'm just going to go ahead and start assembling my setup like so. And yeah, these colors are absolutely wild. Like this is, look how many patterns this can hold. 4 times the amount, which is just ridiculous. It's just a lot, a whole bunch. So if I put this, I'm noticing, I think this actually might work. I don't know if it has to be directly connected to this setup. Let's grab a cable, and it may not need to be. Does that count? It does. Okay. So yeah, I guess this can be set up in any form factor, which works out fine. The main thing that I need to be worried about is the fact that this just uses 8 channels. And if I go up here, we're going to notice it is connected to a DINS cable. Now this DINS cable is split right here. So this is utilizing 1 channel off that DINS. This is using 8 channels off the DINS. So a total of 9 channels being used at the moment, and that is just connected to one side of the controller. So technically we have 32 channels to play with on this particular line. However, I'm probably not going to use all 32. It's just there so we can start to kind of move things around the base. But we have them if we need them, and that definitely goes to show just how much stuff you can actually have connected up, and we can still even expand on our controllers. So yeah, it becomes kind of ridiculous. Now, at this point, I have these cables running down here. I don't really have to have them connected like this, so I can definitely disconnect this. And let's go ahead and remove this connection. This is actually what's storing all of our items, so we definitely don't want to lose this connection. But I'm just going to go ahead and tap it in like that. Honestly, be better if I tapped in here. And that gives me a much cleaner looking setup down here. But now, because that's using 8 channels total, you can see we're now using 17 of our total 32. And so how does this look in our terminal? It's a lot, a whole lot. So this is how big a standard one is. And this up here that I'm scrolling all the way through is our new assembler. Oh, and did I also mention these are just innately 2 times faster at crafting than the standard version. So we're definitely throughout this series going to be getting into more of the powerful stuff that AE2 has to offer, especially when it comes to auto crafting and many other things. Now that I have all of this power and all of that stuff, I've gone ahead and placed gates on here because I did find that for some reason, even with upgrades in here, that this just isn't pulling the right amount of power. This is supposed to have a max output of 1,000, but it still wasn't able to pull enough power out to even supply, for example, this machine, which was just requiring like 320 FE per tick. So instead, I've just placed gates on the front of these, and that's probably going to be a good idea just to make sure that they are maintaining all the power. But now I can really start to upgrade all of these machines by placing in, for all of them, the linkage amplifiers. And I can continue to upgrade these machines, and now I don't have to worry about power. And boy, upgrade I have. I'm slowly but surely building all of these machines up and getting some seeds in for all kinds of different materials. So of course we are going to have like gold and all of our individual stuff that we are producing from sieving, but I also still want to have essence being produced for those as well. And I have room for even more seeds. And something to note too about these phytos, we don't actually need cruxes on seeds that require cruxes. So this is going to make it even easier down the road. Now, something that I think I forgot to kind of show was the red print from Thermal Series. This allows you to copy the settings from a machine and then to paste them into another machine. So you shift right click to copy the settings, and then you can right click to paste them into all of your new machines. But with that, we now have all of our reactors up and running, and these things look glorious. This is going to just continue to expand, and it's also going to expand vertically as well. And the more of the cables that we have exposed, the more cyberpunk this is going to start to look as I start to mix together the orange and the cyan colors. Oh, it looks really good now. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Of course, if you did, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video a huge thumbs up. And now with that being said, it's time for me to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing things is going to go out to Lut. Thank you so much, by the way, for your amazing support by choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting me in one of the best ways possible. So be sure to check out the Discord if you haven't already, discord.gg/ChosenArchitect, and join the amazing crew today. I'll see you in the next one, and as always, thanks for watching. Bye!